Hello, I'm Louise Ross, the author of The Winding Road to Portugal. 20 men from 11 countries share their stories. This book is a collection of mini memoirs, the stories of 20 men from diverse cultural backgrounds who moved countries en route to a life in Portugal, though for some it was not their final destination. In this presentation, I'll briefly address some of the things I learned interviewing the men, and more specifically, what I learned when I compared their stories to the stories of 20 women I interviewed for my previous book, Women Who Walk, how 20 women from 16 countries came to live in Portugal. Before I began the men's project, I did a search of books about the expatriate experience, and I noticed that many of the works are written by women about theirs and their families' experiences. This led me to wonder how this gender bias influences both the way the expatriate experience is portrayed and the support services available to expatriate men. But it was the obvious lack of the male expatriate narrative in the current literature that convinced me of the importance of collecting the men's stories with the intention of exploring the following questions. How do men navigate life at a time fraught with great uncertainty and rapid change, working and moving countries on their own or with a family? Is their path easy because they're men, advantaged with a greater sense of freedom than women? Or do they encounter a different set of challenges, faced with the complexities of what it means to be a man today? At the time I interviewed the 20 men, which is about 2 years ago now, they were aged between 25 and 90. 3 are gay, 18 were either married or in a relationship, and 1 had recently separated. 9 of the men have children, and one of these men is the stay-at-home primary parent. And this man and 1 other are trailing spouses, neither of whom were formally working when I interviewed them, and both of whom were struggling with some depression and feelings of disempowerment as a result of quitting their careers to follow and support their wives. Once I'd conducted the interviews and edited the men's stories, I then compared them to the women's stories. As I already mentioned, 18 of the 20 men were in a relationship, and only 2 had moved to Portugal on their own as single men, whereas 6 of the 20 women were single at the time I interviewed them, and all 6 had moved to Portugal on their own. Though my book addresses the lives of only 20 men, a relatively small sample, research indicates that men's tendency to partner has been linked to health. Reasons for this are men are less likely to seek medical help and less encouraged to do so by their partner. Also, women are more often the motivation behind a couple's social life. In the absence of female spousal support, men's social connections, emotional and physical health tends to deteriorate. 9 out of the 20 men are fathers, and they spoke of their children with tenderness, love and affection. Several of the men carried obvious but contained grief around being separated or estranged from their children due to work, travel for work, divorce, or because their children lived in another country. 10 of the 20 women have children, and when they spoke of them, they were quite pragmatic. Only 1 of the women had been separated from her children, and this was because they were in boarding school in another country. The men's stories tend to be work-focused. Travel for fun and adventure was secondary to the men talking about getting ahead and building financial security for themselves and their families. Not that the women interviewed were any less focused on work and financial security, but the difference is the women's stories are more holistic, addressing a wider range of life experiences. In summary, at a time when there is greater public awareness of mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress syndrome, the men's stories made obvious the importance of emotional and psychological support services. Because what I noticed is that in telling their stories and talking through their experiences, The men had the chance to reflect on their interior lives. Talking gave them the opportunity to identify the ways in which they'd successfully or unsuccessfully managed change, especially the challenges and uncertainties of moving countries. Thank you for listening, and I hope this brief presentation provides coaches, counsellors, and psychologists some insights into the importance of tailoring their services to meet the specific needs of expatriate men.